Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Jellyfish webinar on navigating hiring challenges and burnout. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and I'm very privileged to be here with two guests who also have lived through this for decades now and can speak to some of the ups and downs that we've all seen on this topic. I'm Phil Braden. I'm one of the co-founders here at Jellyfish. We make an engineering management platform that helps our customers understand both qualitatively and quantitatively what's going on with their engineering team and how it aligns with the business. And I'm joined by Michael Patel, the CTO of Genius Sports, and Mike Miner, a partner at West Monroe. Michael, do you want to kick us off with intros?
Sure. Thanks, Phil. My name is Michael Patel. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Genius Sports. Genius Sports is a sports technology company. We offer we build tech across a wide range of different areas.
Super interesting.
Yeah, we sort of started out in, way back when I joined, must have been 2011 or something, when we were still a reasonably small startup. And at the time, we were kind of building analytical models that helped us get an edge on sports betting and helping bookmakers to scale and predict and scale outcome trading in their in sporting events. But over time, we kind of broadened out into this wider technology business that operates in the sports data space, in the computer vision space. So we do a lot of technology installs in sporting venues that help to kind of understand what players are doing on the sporting field, and then bring that understanding to market through different applications, whether it's kind of officiating or advertising or fan engagement, or of course kind of betting. We're the official partner of the NFL and the Premier League. So a little bit about our company. We're about 500 engineers in total in the engineering org, and the company is about 2,000 people as a whole.
Awesome, thank you. And one more Mike Miner, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Hey, everybody. I'm Mike Miner. I'm a partner in the technology and experience practice at West Monroe, leading our software group. For those of you that don't know us yet, West Monroe is a mid-sized consulting firm. We have about 2,000 people, headquartered in Chicago. We have offices all over the country, as well as Latin America and the UK. We primarily do digital consulting, so pairing deep industry expertise with a wide range of technologists. In our practice, we have about 700 people doing all sorts of things: software engineering, product strategy, data and analytics, cybersecurity platforms, and more. Me personally, I have about 20 years of experience in custom software, working with teams of all shapes and sizes. Started out at a startup way back when in the automotive space, grew with that company for a number of years, went through a couple acquisitions, grew with them to the point where they were a few thousand people. And then about 10 years ago, I made the switch and got into the consulting space, which has allowed me to really, I describe it to people as I'm onboarding them and interviewing them, that in the consulting space, it's like career fast track. You get to work with all sorts of companies and see all sorts of different products and technologies, good and bad, see all sorts of different processes and things that work and don't work. So we work with companies of all shapes and sizes, from Fortune 100 companies to startups, and I've been fortunate enough to get to see all the inner workings of those companies. So I'm excited for today's chat, and if anybody has any follow-up questions, happy to chat afterwards as well.
Awesome. I think that between the two of you or the three of us, we've got a really good diversity of seeing different sizes of teams, different stages of companies, different industries. Michael Patel, the stuff that you guys are doing at Genius Sports in and of itself is like just interestingly diverse across the different product lines. So I think we've been through a lot on these topics, and that's why we're excited to talk about it here. So the genesis for this webinar came out of the Jellyfish State of Engineering Management report, where we survey customers and other people and other leaders in the market. We've got really interesting responses on a variety of topics. The ones that we're zooming in on here today, I'm just going to touch on a few of them to set stage for this conversation. Burnout was in the headline of the webinar here, and maybe surprising, at least to me, stat was we got 65% of respondents this year. This I think is the highest we've seen, saying that they've experienced burnout in the past year. And we'll talk more about why, what that looks like, what are the causes, et cetera. But just looking at some of the numbers here and the chart, you can see, there's a little bit of a bookend effect that, small teams maybe see a little bit more, especially at the IC level. And then the larger the team gets, the more you're seeing it at the management and even the executive level. I was a little surprised to see, such a high response rate from R&D executives. You sometimes think of this as like a IC problem, but it clearly is a team-wide or an org-wide issue.
I don't know all of the reasons, but I can, it's like stress is a major contributor to burnout.
Yeah.
Right? Like an R&D executives, they're in that fight now, particularly at large companies when budgets are fairly narrow and they're trimmed, and there's a lot more pressure than perhaps there was a few years ago. Doesn't surprise me that executives feel the pressure. Nor does it surprise me that small companies where ICs have to kind of master many skills and apply them when companies are trying to find their fit, that they're feeling the burn too. Yeah, this is like it's a hard place.
I agree with you. I might be so old school that I'm less surprised that it's happening and more surprised that executives are admitting it. Like, who's taking the survey? I'm like, yeah, that's me. But anyway, it's interesting findings, and I think we have a lot more to say on that in the Q&A portion of this. Another interesting chart that we brought up is, so we looked at the distribution on the previous slide, but here this is talking about more career satisfaction rather than just straight up, have you experienced burnout? And so if you look at the topics and you look at the distributions, there's some challenges across the board for all roles, but I think the real headline is that one on the right where it says, is the work I do rewarding? And you're seeing a very big disparity there for the engineering managers, where that is maybe the most challenged role, which I think there's lots of intuitive reasons for that, but it's another topic worth digging into, and something that really stood out about this survey.
Not specific, like, what do you think the intuitive reasons are?
Well, I think maybe the phrase could be between a rock and a hard place, right? Like, you're the one who if you're the EM, you've got ICs on your team that are asking all the questions about opportunities for growth and promotion and more comp, and do I have to do more work now that the team is smaller, and all of these things. So you're shouldering that, and then you're also on the other side, shouldering whatever your executive team is coming at you with in terms of, we need to do more, we need to change the shape of this thing, or so that's my guess. My guess is that sometimes engineering managers are in a situation where management has become harder now, because company challenges are maybe greater or different than they were in times of plenty and in 2021 with no interest rates. But yeah, that's my guess. My guess is that the engineering managers are the ones that feel like they have to shoulder a lot of challenges, but don't get to do some of the creative or technical work that they maybe grew up doing earlier in their career.
I think a factor of this may also be that engineers get into the roles that they're in because they love the work, they love to code, they also want to progress in their careers, and sometimes that means having to progress into the engineering manager role, but that sometimes takes your hands off the keyboard and you miss the problem solving and being in the trenches with your team and cranking out codes. So maybe you're not doing the role that you love anymore, but for the sake of progressing in your career, you take on those responsibilities.
I'll add one more thought. There's perhaps an industry trend, like a meta trend, which is focused on, like, is the middle management layer of some organizations like efficient, right? Particularly at bigger, larger organizations, how can we streamline management? And some managers in organizations, some leaders, they might get the message that they don't feel valued, right? And it's hard to feel like your work is rewarding when you're seeing a lot of messaging out there, which is like, hey, this is not an important job that you're doing, and actually we want fewer people to do it, and we want flatter structures in the industry. But for the managers, like, the work you do does matter, right? Like, you can have a huge impact on helping the team to manage burnout and to be effective, right?
100%. I mean, and Amazon is not necessarily representative of most companies or most teams, but they certainly made headlines the other day with both return to office, and then as you're reading that, you like a lot of the paragraphs 3 and 4 are stuff about trying to flatten the org structure and reduce hierarchical heavy heavy management structures. So that
Right.
that feed,
But
that's
think
an
about it.
example of what you're talking about.
Yeah, but a lot of people look to big tech as like the role models for how tech should operate, right?
Right.
And it's not just Amazon who have used that as a focal point for an area where they want to focus on the efficiency of.
Yeah, I was at an event a year ago, and this was front and center. How many engineers per manager do you have? Where you see it going in the future rather than the past, and the zeitgeist even then was very much around, we need more higher ratios of engineers to manager, like stop doing this like 5 people on a team, kind of stuff. So I do think there's a lot of pressure there, and I do think you're spot on about how valued do you feel in a role where you're being questioned or being asked to do more, or take on a larger team. And that just piles on to what Mike Miner said about if you got into this as someone who liked to build things, rather than deal with management bureaucracy, like then it's doubly challenging. So one more stat, I want to bring down the slide so we can just have a chat here. But like the last data point from the engineering management report is, we are seeing, and this is a reversal from last year, we are seeing budgets uptick. It's not explicit in this charter and how we surveyed it, but I think it's very clear from talking to everyone that an increase. This does not suggest magnitude. I think the budgets are increasing, but everything I hear is usually in the form of grow responsibly. So this is not a full return to days of excess in 2021, zero interest rates, but it is something that I do think will help. Hopefully it'll bode well for these survey questions and kind of overall sentiment next year, right? That people are not feeling as pressured, throughout 2024 and into 2025 as they were in 2023. So with that, I'm going to take down the slides and just move into Q&A mode. And for participants on the webinar live, I know a lot of people watch this thing streaming rather than live, but if you're watching it live and you want to fill out something in the chat, you can. But Mike and I have taken some time to think about the questions that we would like to see answered if we were on the other side of the webinar here. So just to maybe set stage, I think it's worth talking about what contributes to burnout, because Michael, you were asking me, why do I think some of these results, or some of the sentiment is what it is. Like, just even grounding ourselves in what we see happening and what we see contributing to burnout in the marketplace, I think will help a lot of people just frame the problem, or frame how to attack it. Do either of you want to take a shot at this? I certainly have plenty of thoughts, but I'd love to hear. Mike,
yeah, it's like it's almost like how to start the conversation, right? It's like you open the box.
Right. Well, because just to frame it, like at one end of the spectrum, you could be, we saw a survey result that said teams in really small companies have higher incidence of burnout than most of the mid-sized companies, and that could be at a company level. You might be, we all probably have a friend who works at a startup where the startup is in some existential crisis or dramatically reducing spend, or in some cases even shutting down. So if you're in that situation, there might be burnout because, hey, your company is going through existential business challenges. At the other end of the spectrum, it could just be, your manager is in, do more with less mode, and pushing unreasonable expectations about how to improve productivity in a way that's not grounded in reality, or it's not reasonable. So I think those are two examples. I think there, we can probably talk about some more. Love to hear what either of you think of in terms of like discrete causes of or contributions to burnout.
I think a critical piece of the framing before we even get into it is to just look at where we're at in terms of the last 10 years. We went through this golden age of software engineering where things were just going up nonstop, and perhaps a little bit artificially. And then we had a pandemic and there was a little blip, but then it continued going up, and then people went and worked remote. So now we're dealing with the impacts of that. And now we're on, call it year 2 of a correction. And there's been industry-wide reductions in force, and and we're shrinking rather than growing in a lot of places. So all those are contributors to coming off this incredible high to now getting a little bit of a reality check, and trying to figure out how do we get things back on track.
Right. I think it's like, if I was to put a fixture in place and say one of the major contributors, right, it's like stress and pressure, right? Like it's hard for like humans to manage stress if they're invested in something, if they believe something is like the right thing to do, right? It can cause people to just feel like exhausted by the amount that they feel they have to contribute to get, you know, their team or the company over the line on certain problems. And it's like the teams that are most successful, they have ambitious goals, right? Of course, because you know you have to compete in an industry that's fairly unforgiving, and there are lots of companies who are trying to do interesting things, but like you have to find the sweet spot of ambition and, you know, irrational exuberance for like what's possible, right? Like, so I feel like many companies, they're pushing, and you know, without fully understanding the machinery and the capabilities they have, they set unreasonable expectations, you know, for their team, or you know, they delegate responsibility for planning in such a way that ultimately, like, it creates an untenable situation for the engineering teams. They feel like they're on a death march, that they can't be successful whatever they do. And then yeah, for sure, you see people start to burn out, right? And this is like probably the thing that most people would identify. They're like, okay, well, you know, we have a plan, it's so hopelessly off track, how do we course correct, and how do we get it back on track, and how do we do it in a way that engineers are still like okay, and you know, they feel well supportive, and they like can bring their best creative, like intellectual energy to work, and they don't just feel like they're, you know, they're trying to safeguard themselves, and you know, they're trying to tick boxes to, you know, to meet a deadline, and making bad engineering decisions along the way. So I would put out like this as like one stake in the ground for what contributes to burnout. You know?
100%. And then on top of that, you have in the back of your head, if things don't go well, what's going to happen to my job with the current economic conditions? So it's just a pressure cooker.
Exactly. And I think like, just because I want some of this session not to be entirely like, hey, what are the reasons? But also like, if you're an engineering manager that's listening to this, and like, okay, well, cool, I know this, but like, how do I not do it, right?
Well, right. I think that's part of the value of just trying to, you know, put a framework in place, or itemize the different factors that affect this, and which things are in your control versus under your influence versus you know, things that you have to, you know, kind of navigate around. Because I agree with you, Mike Miner, that you know, we have been through, you know, kind of this unprecedentedly long stretch. I've got enough gray hair to have lived through, you know, plenty of different economic cycles, but this one has been pretty long running, and you end up with people on your team who, you know, you can have, you know, people who are in their early 30s that have only worked in, you know, or, you know, pushing 30, that have like, this is what they've known their entire professional career. You know, they're more living in a time of excess, or, you know, in cases where it's never been easy, I think, to be a software engineer or a manager or an executive, but it's been maybe less, you know, more forgiving, to your words, Mike Patel, more forgiving than it has in other times than it is right now. So there's that on one side. But
I prefer Genius Mike. Right.
Genius Mike, that's right. That's what we were proposing in the other session. I'll use that. So anyway, so you've got almost like exogenous stuff, like this is just the way the world is. And then you've got, you know, what are, you know, how do you manage the work that you're doing? How do you set expectations with your team? How do you deal with on-call schedules and like recruiting responsibilities and all the other things that engineering teams have to do in addition to, you know, shipping the core product and making the business better. And then I do think there's some soft stuff. Like I'll say from my perspective, there's a somewhat tangible and predictable family component to this, where if you see people going through different stages of life, for example, having their first kid, or, you know, raising young children, that can be a time where, you know, that's bringing new challenges on the personal life side. And I do think that And so as a manager, you have to, it's usually helpful to be able to help your team work through that and work through work-life balance. And that's kind of separate from whether they're on call and whether, we've got to ship something at the end of the next sprint. So I think there are different factors, and being aware of all of them and being able to compartmentalize, like, hey, where can I help? Where can I influence? Is part of it's got to be part of the solution.
Well, and this gets a whole lot tougher in a remote world too. You're not sitting next to these people every day, able to see what they're going through and read their body language as they're working and talk to them, at the informal check-ins.
Correct. I think there's a double whammy there, both exactly what you said, which I'd almost factor as like the relationship aspect. Do we have great relationships among team members, between leaders and their teams? Those are often stronger when you know the person in 3 dimensions rather than 2, or when you're doing, if you're a fully remote company, when you're doing the extra stuff to foster relationships, even though it's heavily 2-dimensional. But then there's another aspect to it, which could be a cause of burnout, which is more along the lines of the full blurring of work and home life, where now if we're all living at home during the actual pandemic, or working from home for perpetuity afterwards, our families, our house, our kids, all of that stress is around us, maybe during the day, and then our work is, because our work's happening over Slack and Zoom and email. That doesn't necessarily start and stop at 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock the way that it did back in the day, when you would show up at the office and then leave later.
Sure. Throw a few time zones into that as well, and it's difficult. I'll share like one story, at least from personal experience, about like where in the past we've struggled with burnout, right? And how we've kind of over time tried to improve our engineering team so that they've gotten a bit better at this kind of stuff, right? Like, one thing we do as a company, right, is we typically partner with a sporting league. It can be anything. It could be the professional pogo stick organization that wants to run, right?
It's not all NFL and Premier League.
Right, exactly. It's one of the things about Genius Sports. It's very like, below the surface. Like we for sure work with some of the like tier ones, right, the biggest sporting leagues in the world, but we've got a long tail of sports that are just trying to improve their league to bring new fan engagement experiences to the market, and keep their fans happy, right? And like, they have an appetite for many things, right? And they have relatively inflexible like delivery dates that are like season starts, right? And for the course of the last 10 years, we've gone anywhere from like, this is a happy path plan, right? We're going to deliver something on the last day before the preseason starts, and it's going to work. And then we're going to fly into the season, and we're going to launch it on day 1, right? And everybody has had a very, very stressful time, right? Like you'll be on like week 6, and they'll be like, okay, actually we need to hire some people in the team. Well, okay, the plan doesn't have any time to hire people, right? It's like, okay,
right,
what are we going to do now? We're not spending our time like working on code. It's like, okay, the plan doesn't have any time for remote meetings, right? Like, because it's also not in the plan. It's like, okay, well, this engineering decision that we made, also not in the plan, right? The plan, they're like inflexible sometimes, like the way that we plan and the naivety of the plan that we would create around these kind of like deadlines. And like that,
this is sounding like unintentionally unreasonable expectations. Like, they seemed reasonable at first glance, but then when you start to do the math and reality gets in the way.
It's
anyway,
like,
continue.
how much time are you leaving for contingency and just expecting not to make 100% of the correct decisions of the plan? I've never seen a plan basically being like, okay, this from start to finish is going to be exactly what we do, and it's going to work, first time, right? So if you're starting out and you're like, okay, we unfortunately do have to have some structure and some expectation management around customers, right? I know this is not like, rocket science or anything, but just trying to like, get yourself into the habit of like, what's the amount of contingency, and what's the amount of side planning, the other things that we're doing that, are going to help us to not set an unreasonable expectation and then have to walk back from it, right? It's way better to know where you stand before you commit, and then you have customers who are then piling on pressure because they've been given information that is like, it's not working out for them, and they have their own stakeholders to manage, right? So that's something I would would offer as a, as a route out, right? Just try to avoid putting yourself in the position if you can. And then like the other part I would balance it with is like when you are doing different types of activity, right? Like if you're like recruiting, for example, trying to balance the type of like, focus and commitment that you put on people to do that activity. It's kind of hard and kind of stressful sometimes to continuously screen people. It's a hard thing to do to really vet and validate someone's skills if not everybody is qualified for a job, and it can be quite a high pressure scenario to come into an interview if you're not naturally that outgoing as well. And interviewers too, they feel that that tiredness after having done it for a certain number of successive cycles, and just monitoring small things like that and then changing small things like that, it can help you to do a better job keeping your engineering team fresh, right, and keeping them on the good path when we're actually building the things that we need to build.
On that specific topic, so your first one was more around making sure that as managers we're kind of planning and managing expectations around work, but the second point of like how you what demands you're putting on people and being cognizant of what they like to do, what they don't like to do, and how it might affect their work and their stress. Do you, I mean, just as a specific tip for people out there, did you end up with, there are certain people on your team that you try to give a disproportionate amount of the recruiting responsibility to because they're better suited for it, or is it just more you're still spreading it out? You're just being mindful of how you do it and how you manage.
Generally, we tried to operate a system where we were rotating people in, right, and rotating people up. And when we found we didn't have enough interviewers, we took the approach of trying to bring in more people to shadow interviews and sort of get them up to speed so they can participate, and then they can relieve the pressure on others in the interview process. It's not just recruiting cycles that can take time away from the process of building features, right? Like if you're a successful company and you have systems that are older and systems that are newer and systems that you're trying to extend, like on-call is the other thing that can create a lot of stress and a lot of burnout if it's not managed well. Like the software industry as a whole, right? Like particularly with like infrastructure in the cloud being more accessible to development teams, like Terraform, you've got infrastructure as code, and people are getting much better at it. You have a lot more autonomy to build things as an engineering team, but then as part of that autonomy, you get the responsibility, right? You own the pager, you own the system stability. Like in the past, we might have just managed that very easily. Like, okay, well, add 3 more heads to the team, and then you can manage more of the stuff that you're building, right? But there's this kind of compression where you also have to be efficient with how you're deciding to build out, right? Like the compactness of the software that you actually operate. And if it's failing often and you're not actually resolving the issues that are causing it to fail, it can cause a lot of stress and a lot of burnout.
Yeah, I think closely related to this. Sorry, Phil.
No,
closely related to this is like, how do you divide just generally the work? Certain tasks can be more mundane. Certain tasks can be a lot more difficult. Maybe there's critical support issues. And maybe people are best suited for certain types of tasks, but regardless of that, if you're constantly leaning on someone, like I've been guilty of this before, where I have these very, very reliable, high output people that I really rely on to be heroes. And if you do that too much, now you're putting them in a tough spot. You got to make sure that you're distributing the workload in a variety of ways that can kind of give people different flavors of the work so that the problems are constantly new and they can stay engaged and satisfied, as well as if somebody's on one thing too long, or if you're just really putting too much on one person because you feel like it's out of necessity. Over time that could break down. You could lose that person, or they could just become less engaged. So just being cognizant about what are the specific tasks and how they impact the people I'm assigning them to, and where are people's thresholds for satisfaction and really like stress.
It's great, and it's actually sort of a pseudo advertisement for for you, Phil, because it's like why do you measure things? How do you measure things, right?
Right.
Like, how do you instrument the systems that you have? How do you classify the types of work that you're doing so you can get a better understanding at scale of the engineering org, right? And that's like one of the things we use Jellyfish for, right? Like
Right.
we classify productivity oriented tasks, keep the lights on type stuff, and we can use it to understand like who might be at risk of burnout, who might be, not challenged enough or too challenged, right? So it's like in some ways it's nice that it closes the loop, and it's like, okay, to really be effective at this stuff, you have to measure it somehow, right? And if
I'll take the advertisement. I think it's certainly, it's great to see our customers get value out of whether it's looking at activity levels, who's taking on too much of the work of their team, or you just mentioned nature of work, who's spending too much time or maybe getting stuck with all of the support work or things like that, and understanding that stuff from a quantitative standpoint. I think it's also really good to see the progress that's been made in the industry and the use of our product and others to survey your people and understand how they're feeling that way. I do want to actually talk to you both about, so those are some best practices. You should have some tooling in place, but how else do you stay attenuated to this or stay attuned to it? Because you have, a lot of, like Mike Miner, what you were just saying, or even Mike Patel, when you're talking about, how much interviewing is okay, how much on call is okay. This depends on how people are doing. And so you kind of have to know how people are doing. So how, in your experience, what are best practices for first and second line managers to, keep their finger on the pulse, so to speak, of their people and know, where they're at with respect to burnout? Is this a thing that you talk to them directly about and encourage to be, part of one-on-ones, or is this you kind of, if you smell smoke, then you investigate kind of thing?
It's kind of like, or at least for us, you have to have like a culture as a first class citizen in some ways, right? Like you could go to every manager in the organization, but make sure you talk about burnout with your guys, that they'll do it once, right? But you want to build this kind of generative culture, right? Where it's known at every level, like when you recruit people, when you promote people, and when you fire people, that like we support each other as a team, and we look out for each other, and we make sure that everybody is working towards, everybody is helpful, and everybody's ambitious enough without being, completely, unrealistic, right? Or reckless, right? And then we look for people who are like okay with change, right? Like change itself is hard, right? And but it's way harder if you're just like, I want to work somewhere where everything is stable and it's going to be okay. That's not our technology business, right? So having those like guiding principles at a cultural level, it can help you like identify people who naturally lead in that space. They naturally look out for their team. They naturally ask these questions about burnout. And then you can give them the tools, right? So you can help them to actually like, okay, well, if you're trying to solve this problem because it's instinctive to you to solve, right? Here's a tool that can help you do it. And this is way, way easier, right? Like you can, of course, teach people and say like, look, these are some lifelong lessons that I've learned about how people can burn themselves out. And I appreciate that we're ambitious. These are like small interventions that we make in our company, like occasionally larger if we know that we're really hitting some heavy cycles, right? Like last year we did a data center migration from our historical data center in the Docklands or something to the cloud. And yeah, we had some of those conversations then, and there may be some time in the future where it's like it's apparent to everybody that a conversation needs to be had, but like having that cultural guiding star to help people as a starting point, I think is very beneficial.
Yeah, it's the culture top down and bottom up, and it's the culture of how you create the community within the company so that they can support each other. But really, I think you have to cast a wide net in order to best identify this and rectify it. Just having one-on-ones isn't enough. Certain people may open up, others won't. You need to be observant. You need to be proactive and reactive. If there are symptoms of it, obviously that needs to become critical priority. But try to figure it out before it even gets to that point, and put the systems in place so that people feel supported and can talk to people and can seek help. We need to explore this by every avenue. We send out surveys multiple times a year to get the pulse of the company that way. I think everything is the answer. Do as much as you can. No ideas is too bad. Obviously, we can't spend all of our time on this, but as much stuff as you can do to just understand where your people are at, and get to know them. I think not only does it alleviate burnout, but it gives them a sense of home, increases satisfaction. It allows everybody to work better together because you know each other better. So I would just say, yeah, cast a wide net, figure out what works for you, and continue to think about new opportunities to find out where people's heads are at.
I think this is all good stuff, and maybe to boil it down to feedback for first and second line managers. I think this is a nuanced problem. So, like to your point, Mike Patel, you can't take it head on and just be like, "Hey, are you burnt out?" That can't be the topic of the one-on-one. But I do think you can encourage first line managers to be more attuned to, is this person, kind of, getting the development progress that they need? Are they working on work that's interesting to them? Are they, carrying an unfair share of the team's load? There's a lot of, second order effects that I think great managers are paying attention to, so that they can, do the intervention, or kind of lean in the cases where it's needed.
I'll say one thing, right?
Yeah.
Earlier on, we had a slide which is like, there's a lot of managers who are like, I don't feel very rewarded for my job, but it's like, it's a weird thing to say, right? Because it can be such a superpower if you do, if you do have this like stewardship position where you're looking after the team. Maybe not, it might not be so self-reflective, right? I think it might just be indicative, like this pattern where lots of engineers have kind of been promoted into managerial positions because they thought this is like how I succeed in my career, and they perhaps underestimate like how much energy goes into working like the human APIs that people have, like to really make sure that they feel supported, like learning to read their emotional signals and genuinely like sort of caring for them and their career progression and them as humans. It's like, it's a hard competitive space to often work in, but it's still like understanding how to get people to talk and feel psychological safety and open up about some of these issues. It's not always easy. Like, it's certainly not as simple as being like, are you burned out? Right. Like,
right.
So this is like also training and skill at the manager level, right?
And
Oftentimes that involves looking inward. Like, are you creating a space where somebody can give you critical feedback? Are you taking that critical feedback and really processing it and improving yourself? Because if somebody's not comfortable telling you what they're seeing, providing ideas on how to make improvements, giving you constructive feedback, then they're probably not going to tell you if they're burnt out.
Well, Mike, when we're talking about at the manager level, and I'm suspecting that you probably have a good view to this at some scale, given globally distributed teams that you have. Part of what what Genius Mike might be flagging is that some frontline managers still may be early in their development. That might also, my suspicion of what we're seeing in some of the survey results is that people are maybe in a situation that they are unprepared for. They're not getting the help that they need from their manager, right? So what executives or second line managers have to do to help develop their first line managers and figure out who's like super well suited for this job and who has all the skills to be a great people leader. Like, I think that's still a work in progress, and there might be a hangover of all the growth that we went through during the golden age, as you put it.
Right.
So there probably is a bill to pay there in terms of like, how do I help all of these managers not just deal with burnout, but actually become good managers so that they are able to manage a team in 2025 and beyond, rather than just kind of go through the motions in 2021.
Right. Yeah.
There might be a step here where we have to look at interest. Some of these people might be in roles that they're not interested in, they're not passionate about. And if that's the case, it's going to be tough for them to take that leap. So perhaps there is a little mini wave of people that say, hey, I kind of want to be an IC.
Yeah, and I think it's important for leaders to make space for that to happen, and not make it be like an up or out, kind of situation. There's obviously anybody who's run an engineering team knows that there's plenty of room for senior individual contributors. And if somebody has, tried the management path and realizes that they'd be better suited on the IC path, like you'd be foolish not to make room for them to do that and encourage the switch.
Yeah,
But again, I feel like
oftentimes-
I was going to say, but again, that's
yeah.
on the second line manager to make sure that they're figuring that out.
Oftentimes those people are your high performers that move up, and you need, you don't want to lose them still. So you got to make a safe way for them to pivot again if that's where you land.
Right. Raise your hand if you've only figured that you figured this out too late before, right? You've learned the hard way. Like, oh, I thought Mike really wanted to be a people leader, but now he's just put in his 2 weeks notice because he accepted some other job because he's been hating it for the last year.
Yeah. It happens a
Yeah.
lot. I think it's like in a good career track, you can graduate both individual contributors and managers by the impact that they contribute, right? Like managers can contribute a lot of impact by helping teams to be more productive and helping people to grow and succeed and be happy and motivated. But individual contributors can solve these kind of like very thorny, deep, like convoluted technical challenges that span multiple teams or are often like, in systemic parts of the system. And they take like this kind of deep mental energy and ambition to actually unpick and, stop everybody trying to tactically, tiptoe around a problem that's just deeper than that.
Yeah, I'm watching the clock here. I want to make sure we address one other topic that we talked about early in the webinar, which is budgets are increasing at least a little bit. Hiring challenges still remain. It's not like it became magically easy to hire people now, and I think a lot of teams are have been thinking about and are still kind of actioning their plans for how to evolve the shape of their team in 2024 and beyond. So, given everything we've talked about in terms of people and culture, what impacts or what effects do you think that has going forward on how people shape their teams? Or what are you seeing at Genius Sports and at West Monroe?
So yes, you're right. The budgets have increased for us this year, and internally at Genius Sports, and we've done some hiring. In fact, we've set up a new office this year in New York, right? And it's involved some hiring, and we've had some engagement in the local market. And it's sort of counter-cycle because I suppose a lot of teams are looking to nearshore. But one thing that I think has underpinned our philosophy to growing the team is that we more than ever wants to find people who are not just technically skilled, right? Like they've got the right technical machinery to solve technical challenges, but they have the right values that align with what the organization is trying to achieve, that they care about the same things that we do. They share the same values that many of our engineers share. Those are things that we place even more emphasis now on, because like having people who don't fit in that bucket, then it's just very hard for us to integrate them. And it's been like a major component of our thinking that perhaps haven't always done a good job of, when there's been like very, very free flowing cash and the kind of high pressure to grow it at any cost. But it's something that is way more resident in our thinking now. Something that
so it sounds like you're making a culture push as part of this. Like you're being more intentional than ever. I'm sure you've always been very intentional about culture, but part of this is, hey, if we do this way, not only will we get the skills, the technical skills that we need, but we'll also be able to just shape our culture a bit more.
I guess it's important to me because I want our engineers to have this kind of systems thinking mentality, right? Where they can reason about the company as a whole and they can understand and contextualize how it operates, right? Like we're a public company, and like part of our like how we're evaluated is by shareholders, and it's like boring, but that means that we can't just infinitely grow, right?
Right.
Like from any ambition, right? Like we have to be frugal in how we build software, like how we build infrastructure, right? Like we have to think about the broader machine that we're trying to build in a compact way for all of our engineering teams to be to be productive, and we have to kind of consider ourselves like one team. And that system mentality, right? Like it's only possible if you've got people who are capable and they want to, right, be involved in this larger mission, and they want to look outside of their direct responsibilities and learn more, and they're motivated to grow and to be part of the part of the train in some ways. So this is like an important thing for us.
Got it. And Mike Miner, you're seeing, so if Mike Patel is talking about like shaping the culture at his own company, you've got view to many companies who probably are not as, I'm sure they want you to work within their culture, but you're probably more helping them influence the shape and skills of their teams. What are you seeing in terms of trends, in now that we're in times of scarcity and, people have to grow responsibly and things like that. And I'm guessing you're also dealing with companies that are Genius Sports size and maybe even bigger.
Yeah, so in our business, the answer is always it depends, but we're definitely seeing a growing need in our Latin American office, particularly around engineering. So kind of pushing that rate structure down. Our teams perform very well down there. It's kind of indistinguishable with a lot of our onshore teams. So that's what our clients are starting to do, is ask for that nearshore team to help out, or a blend of nearshore and onshore. And it works really well. So we've definitely been seeing that be the push during this economic downturn. But I think
what about in terms of like, seniority levels or skill sets? Is it across the board, or is there like a trend that you're seeing in terms of the types of the types of teams that you're being asked to provide?
I think it's mostly about cost right now, is what we see. So we always have kind of a pyramid, a lot of really strong independent contributors, and then some really strong leaders and some people that are growing into those really strong individuals. So I don't think the structure of the staff that we have has changed all that much in terms of leveling. It's more about where they're sitting.
Got it. That's helpful.
And then
just
on to Michael's point, I think kind of an interesting time where, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just seeing we're over time, but it's kind of an interesting time where there are certainly people out there hiring, not as much as there used to be, and there are people that are getting laid off and not able to plan their transition to the next job, which creates urgency to take whatever comes your way. So I think it's more critical than ever to make sure that they're aligned with your values and the way you do things, and they're not just looking for a paycheck next week and then going to take their time and find their long-term job 6 months from now, because that cost is too great to be making those hires.
Yeah, I think if we're going to offer, one final piece of advice to people out there, mine would be, this is still something that there's been enough change over the past, year or three, that this is something that you're still going to have to be very attuned to and actively manage. We shouldn't think that because the stock market's better, or I don't know what the interest rate, cut that, is going to be announced today. But like that doesn't mean this goes away. I think there's still some debt to pay here in terms of helping your managers be better managers, helping your people, be in the right roles, and helping, shape, what your team looks like over the next, 3, 6, 12 months. Those, like, it'll take some hard work to get the improved survey scores that I'm expecting to see next year.
It's an opportunistic time, right? If you make the right moves right now, then you're going to be well positioned when things do shift in the larger economy.
Agreed. Genius Mike, any final thoughts for us?
No, I was going to do the mic one. I totally agree. It's like like how you play your hand when times are tough matters just as much as when money is free flowing and everything is great. So it's still a competition in many ways with other technology companies, and like how you use your team, like how you work with the people that are there with you. It matters a lot, and like avoid them burning out, right? Or let them burn out your
Yeah. I think embrace the opportunity, because that's the other advice I give to people, like at the company culture level, right? If you treat this all as stress, like the stress will project down through the team, and then the engineers will be stressed and they'll be burnt out. But if you project it as opportunity, all of our companies have opportunities to do something exceptional here, and it is possible to rally teams around that. And if even down to the IC level, if you're getting out of bed in the morning, thinking about the opportunity and the chance to do something great, that's a lot different than, getting out of bed in the morning and worrying about the stress that's being put on our business. So I do see, tons of opportunity right now and in the months and years ahead.
Navigate this right, and keep your people feeling like part of the community of your company, and you can come out of this with some very, very loyal people to carry you well into the future.
Yeah, and you'll be better at your job for a decade or more to come. I'm pretty sure of it. Thank you both for doing this. It's been really great to talk to you both in the webinar and in the run up to it. Thanks to everyone who is watching this, and yeah, look forward to having you both back for another topic sometime soon.
Great.
Send it up, Phil.
Go.
Take care, everyone.
Everybody.